So hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Expert Talk Online. My name is Erin O'Connor, and I'm a delivery lead at Equal Experts. And basically, I'm only here to introduce our presenter today. But before I introduce him, just some housekeeping. So questions will be taken throughout the talk, and the best way to do that is use the Zoom Q&A function, which again is along the bottom of your Zoom window. And that way we can you can upvote some questions. So the reason why we're here. So my lovely colleague, Steve Smith, is a lot of things. For example, he's an author, he's a speaker, a thinker, a measurer, a leader, an organizer, and a very clever friend to me. He's also the head of the scale service at Equal Experts, and that's the global technology consultancy where we both work. So welcome, Steve, and please enlighten all of us about multi-product teams and what a magnificent maintenance mode looks like.
Thank you, Erin. That's the sweetest introduction I've ever had. I'm going to write that down afterwards. Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, or good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to talk about maintenance mode, not a glamorous topic, but I'm well known for not doing glamorous topics. I kind of distrust them. I'm much more interested in the big problems that large organizations like really grapple with, and maintenance mode is definitely a scaling problem that many organizations will eventually face. So we're going to cover 4 different solutions. We'll have some genuine customer stories woven in, poorly disguised as an American retailer that isn't American or a retailer. And on top of that, I've run a maintenance mode survey across Equal Experts recently because Gene Kim made me do that. And we're going to have data available from over 40 different organizations. So it's all going to fit together seamlessly. It's all going to be magnificent. So who am I? I'm the head of the scale service at Equal Experts. As Erin has said, we're a global technology consultancy of around 3,000 people, so big enough to matter, small enough to still be like super friendly. And my job is a little unusual. It's all about talking with our customers and consultants to understand scaling problems as they emerge, and then contribute to how we solve them with our customers. And the reason that we have a scale service is that scale problems occur at different stages in the product lifecycle, and they can slow you down, they can harm you when you're trying to scale up by adding teams, scaling steady by optimizing teams, or scaling down by retiring or resizing teams. Scaling problems are unanticipated, they're invisible, and believe me, they're super annoying. All right, so let's talk about today's scaling problem. What the hell is maintenance mode? So just dream with me, okay? You've got plenty of teams and plenty of services, maybe a hodgepodge of monoliths and microservices, maybe a zoo of data pipelines. A few of these services will be differentiators. They'll have regular demand for innovation. This talk isn't about them, forget them. They're not important for the next 2 hours. Not really 2 hours. No, I want to talk about the majority of your services, the non-differentiators, the services that you built because you had to, not because you wanted to. Your teams worked really hard to build them to continuously deliver planned features to your customers. But once those services go live, the planned features slow down, the deploys slow down, and they reach zero demand. Zero demand doesn't mean zero user needs or zero future features or zero faults. Software can't entirely satisfy users, it can't be finished, and as the late great Dr. Richard Cook was fond of saying, it can't be fault-free. Zero demand is really a nice way of saying zero funding remains for feature development, at least for now. So the day-to-day work becomes maintenance tasks only, upgrading libraries, applying security patches, and fixing faults. You might know this as maintenance mode, keeping the lights on, business as usual, evergreening, which I'm really trying to discourage as a term. But whatever you call it, make no mistake, the maintenance mode is inevitable if you've got annual funding for your IT services. And the problem that we have here is who manages these zero demand services at scale? Who looks after your hodgepodge of monoliths and microservices? Who looks after your zoo of data pipelines once the money runs out? You can spot this problem by listening out for its symptoms. Someone might say something like, we need to increase team capacity for new work. Somebody might say, we need to reduce team costs. Perhaps it's the same person saying both things. Perhaps they're biting their fingernails a lot. Perhaps they know that there are business critical services out there that few people will soon care about. To solve this problem, you need an ownership model that allows for important maintenance tasks to happen and for teams to be reassigned to increase capacity and for teams to be resized or retired to reduce costs. Those are your two new outcomes that you're trying to achieve with your maintenance mode solution. Those are the two things that people really think about up front. But from experience, Equal Experts, we know that you've got some existing outcomes to protect and you shouldn't throw them away to achieve these two new outcomes. You need to protect the current level of live services reliability. You don't want to have more downtime and lose more money once you put a service into maintenance mode. You also need to protect the current level of feature delivery. I don't mean the frequency of feature delivery. I mean the speed of feature delivery when you do want to do it. Yes, with zero demand services, you will do less work, but no funding doesn't mean giving up on improving customer experience. No funding doesn't mean giving up on improving revenue growth when an opportunity presents itself or you have a good idea. When you do want to make changes infrequently, you still want them to happen relatively quickly. And you also need to protect the current level of job satisfaction that people find in their work. All over the world now, I consistently hear from our customers that their labor market's really tight, that team churn rates is a problem, that staff retention is definitely a thing they're worried about. All right, so we've got 4 different ways to try and solve this problem. Let's have a look at what they are, how effective they are, and what problems they cause themselves, because nothing is perfect, and often you introduce a solution to fix a problem, and that creates new problems. So our first solution is, let's not change too much stuff. Let's have the delivery teams solve this problem for us. So what does that look like? Here's a composite American retailer. It's not really American, but I like America. My first ever plane journey was from Britain to New Zealand, and we had to stop over in America for 3 hours in Los Angeles to refuel. They put us in a glass room for 3 hours while a tannoy boomed out that we shouldn't talk to any solicitors in the airport if they approached us. I've never been so scared in my life. At this composite retailer, we have 13 delivery teams building 13 services. 2 of them are going to be differentiators, we expect, the product details page and the online checkout experience. They'll have longer term funding. Forget those, we're not interested in those today. 11 services here are built for parity, so they're going to reach zero demand at some point, and then they're like the Norwegian blue parrot. They aren't dead, they're just resting. So who looks after them while they're resting? Well, with this maintenance mode solution, it's the same delivery teams that built them. The delivery teams do maintenance tasks in the background when their services reach zero demand, while they build new services in the foreground. And a central operations team does live support for everyone. That's what these blue lines signify here. When zero demand is reached, the service is fed back into the delivery team and they continue to look after it. And if you didn't understand that Norwegian blue reference, then look it up. The Pythons were great for their time. All right, what do we think is good with this solution? Well, firstly, you can create capacity for teams to start new product capabilities if you're lucky, or projects if you're unlucky. There's a similar level of services reliability here because delivery teams can do maintenance tasks in a timely fashion and to a similar standard as before. And each team here has a low cognitive load and the technical skills and domain knowledge that they require. We aren't chucking more work into teams beyond their capabilities. And you can do some future feature delivery because there's clear business ownership. And make no mistake, the single biggest factor in your ability to continue to achieve some future feature delivery is quick prioritization. Okay, so in this maintenance mode solution, every zero demand service is maintained by its own delivery team, which means there is a dedicated product manager Now, that is assuming that one delivery team has the same product manager for its two services, one background, one foreground. If that's not the case, there'll need to be a prioritization process, or as I prefer to call it, a bun fight, a daily bun fight. All right, what do we think is bad with this solution? Well, there's no intrinsic motivation for teams here. There's little sense of mission or purpose, and job satisfaction can definitely deteriorate over time. But crucially, you can't resize or retire teams with this maintenance mode solution. You started with 13 teams at your American retailer, you still have 13 teams afterwards. That's the thing that matters most here. It's why our customers often believe that dedicated delivery teams aren't value for money with zero demand services. That's why this maintenance mode solution usually starts by accident and usually ends as someone turns up and says, we need to reduce costs immediately. I know a publishing company that has its delivery teams managing zero demand services in the background. It wasn't planned, it just kind of happened. Teams allocate 1 day a week to do maintenance tasks on their background services, usually Fridays. Developers grumble when they do it. They don't enjoy working on maintenance tasks. They prefer working on their new services with shinier tech. They don't see the struggles their operations team have with the live zero demand services that subscriber revenues actually flow through. Okay, here's all that information in a summary format. The columns here are the new outcomes you're trying to achieve and the existing outcomes you're trying to protect, and the rows are different maintenance mode solutions. And we can see here that with our first solution, the delivery team solution, you get one of your new outcomes. You can increase capacity, that's good. You don't get your second new outcome, you can't reduce costs, that's bad. And we protect some outcomes, and we take a hit on job satisfaction, that's bad. And that's right, you've guessed it, we're going to fill in this table slowly and gradually over the next half an hour. Exciting, isn't it? But what makes it extra exciting is we have some maintenance mode survey results for you. And the way we did that was we collected data from Equal Experts customers and consultants, totaling over 40 different organizations. We wanted to know how many people out there agreed with our hypotheses on different maintenance mode solutions, on the outcome impacts that people are actually experiencing out in the wild. We knew not to just contact people and say, do you agree with what we think? We asked people how their organization was approaching maintenance mode and what they saw happen in terms of capacity, costs, services reliability, future feature delivery, and job satisfaction. So for new outcomes, we had 58% of respondents for that solution agree that putting zero demand services into the background resulted in a capacity increase. And 100% of respondents agreed with us that no cost reductions could be achieved, which is what we'd expect. For existing outcomes, 75% of people believe that the level of services reliability was similar to before maintenance mode. 50% said feature delivery was possible at a similar rate to before. That was lower than we expected. And one responder kind of summed that up for us. They said, we were still seeing new feature requests from users, high value stuff that made money, but when apps were in maintenance mode, it really slowed down these requests. Sometimes IT would just say, no, we can't do that. It's in maintenance. That team is too busy. I guess that company's making enough money already, right? And only 33% saw a drop in staff happiness, which is good for them and bad for me because I thought it would be higher than that. But Anne says here, worse sometimes like a real cry for help. One person said to us, over the last couple of months, we've had to dial up maintenance tasks on the old service, dial down work on the new service, and it's had a really noticeable impact on team morale. All right, let's look at our next solution. Well, the logical extension to developers doing maintenance work and operations doing live support is throw more stuff over the wall earlier. So what does this involve? Here's our American retailer again. It's not really American, but I do like America. I went to New York once, got into a lot of trouble. I went to a bagel shop and asked for a British-sized bagel. The waitress asked what I meant. I said, your food sizes in this country are ridiculous. Make a bagel half your normal size, charge me full price, and that'll be fine. She threw me out, and now I can't get a bagel anywhere in Manhattan. So what happens with this? The worst part of that story is that it is actually mostly true, except for the whole Manhattan bit. just the one shop. So with this solution, what happens is delivery teams transition their zero demand services into the central operations team, and then they can build new services. The operations team does maintenance tasks and live support for everyone. I did very intentionally use the word transition there because it's probably some kind of it'll process. There'll be some kind of warranty period, lots of theatre, lots of Jira tickets. It's really exciting stuff. With this solution, we've now got our 11 non-differentiator services traveling along these blue lines into the operations team. They're transitioned in one at a time once they've had enough live traffic and planned features start to slow down because the money's running out. So with this solution, you have two long-lived delivery teams on the differentiators, the product details page and the online checkout experience, one operations team doing all the maintenance mode work, all the live support, and 11 teams you can resize and reassign. Okay, so there are some good things here. You can create capacity for teams to build new services because one team is doing all the maintenance mode work for everyone. You can reduce costs because once a delivery team transitions its zero demand service painfully into the operations team, that team can be resized or retired as you wish. You can start to scale down. That's a good thing. You can also reduce costs further by outsourcing your operations team to a third-party managed service if that's what you really want to do. But bear in mind a warning from one of our customers who said that when you do that, you lose sight of BAU maintenance tasks and you lose sight of any kind of leading indicators of future reliability problems. Right, there's a lot of bad things with this solution. First of all, reliability takes a hit because your 100% blameless operations analysts who have done nothing wrong are affected by two things. First, their cognitive load can be really high because there's no limit to the number of zero demand services that could be transitioned into an operations team. They might have to implement a security patch across tens or hundreds of different live workloads while handling live instance and improvement actions in a variety of different product families, different business contexts, different business rules. It can be really, really difficult. And secondly, they probably, maybe, possibly don't have all of the technical skills and domain knowledge to rapidly complete maintenance tasks like fixing the code and updating automated functional tests after a library upgrade that you just have to do, make some breaking code changes. And of course, they can't go back to the delivery team for help because they've been retired or resized and they've moved on. The operations team are on their own. This does have an impact on technical quality and on reliability, not because your operations analyst did something wrong, but because of the way you set up your system. And you can see that impact, that negative impact, as a slower deployment lead time and a slower time to recover from failure for different live services. Future services delivery is a big problem here that's often overlooked at the start, because as well as missing skills and technical knowledge, using an operations team usually means one of two things. You have a pool of live services with zero demand, and there will either be many business owners or zero business owners. There could be zero because they're just not connected at all to your operations team and their workloads. There could be many business owners because there are many live services from many product families all heaped into one team. Either way, you aren't going to have a single business owner who can quickly make prioritization decisions as an apex decision maker. Either way, business ownership isn't clear. Either way, prioritization here is a complete nightmare. It's an endless bun fight over an ever-growing support backlog. The only countermeasure I've seen to that is to fund a short-lived delivery team for a few live services with some planned features, but that's not a magic fix. And a reverse service transition out of an operations team, bringing a live service back into a delivery team can be even more painful than the transition in the first place. And of course, when there's few planned features alive, what you're going to do, you're going to transition that live service back into the operations team who are going to be really grumpy by now. And there's a lack of job satisfaction with this maintenance mode solution because your developers feel like they're in a never-ending feature factory and your operations team feel like they're in a never-ending dumping ground. So retention can be problematic here. I know a car repair company. This car repair company has an operations team running its EPOS software in maintenance mode. The original delivery team had to complete a 300-question spreadsheet to transition their live service into the operations team for maintenance tasks. Some operations analysts on this team lack the skills needed to do all of the library upgrades, so performance updates don't always happen in a timely fashion, and customer experience at tills in car repair stores doesn't improve when expected. And sometimes there are new payment regulations. Everyone says, we won't need to touch this service ever again, but of course you do, because governments change their minds on stuff. So when it happens, there has to be a reverse service transition back into a temporary delivery team. And when they finish their functional changes, there's another transition back into the operations team, and you have to do the 300-question spreadsheet all over again. It's a time-consuming, wasteful merry-go-round. All right, back to our summary table. So you can see here that the operations team solution does achieve the two outcomes that people want up front: more capacity and lower costs. Maybe that explains why I've seen this maintenance mode solution more than any other. But it fails to protect any of your existing outcomes. Maybe that explains why I've seen this solution become so problematic in the medium to long term. And here are the maintenance mode survey results for operations teams maintaining zero demand services. Some of the answers here were heartbreaking. People, this is not a good maintenance mode solution. So for new outcomes, 66% of respondents agreed with us that putting zero demand services into the operations team resulted in capacity increases. That's good. And 55% agreed there were cost reductions possible, as we'd expect, because you can resize and retire delivery teams here. That's good. But for existing outcomes, 55% felt the level of services reliability was worse after the operations team took on maintenance tasks as well as live support. A responder said, we had a lovely time once. That means they didn't have a lovely time. We had a deployment at 2 in the morning. It went a bit wrong. We spent the next 20 hours hacking away and fixing because lots of updates had been delayed and the ops team were unable to roll back to an earlier good version. 55% believe that feature delivery was more difficult than before. One person said to us, the ability to handle maintenance is the most painful concept for this company to grasp. They have massive outsourced operations contracts that have little or no allocation for upgrade work. It has to be a change request, and then it has to be a purchase order. The amount of waste in this process is criminal. Don't worry, I've phoned the police about the crimes being committed there. You don't have to phone them yourself. And 88% of respondents saw a big drop in staff happiness. Someone said to us, the operations team was permanently unhappy, and I felt really bad for them. There's a proportional relationship between happiness in maintenance tasks and familiarity with that live service. That's a great quote that I'm going to pass off as my own tomorrow. All right, our third solution is regional support teams. We tend to see this more often in public sector organizations. We've seen it a fair few times now, though. All right, what happens here? Here's our American retailer again. It's not really American, but I like America. I went to Disneyland once. Staff kept saying, hello, friend, and rushing up to me to help me out. It's amazing. Just things aren't like that outside of America. The teams here are now tied to Austin and Chicago offices. So we've got 6 non-differentiators in Austin headed into the Austin regional support team, and 5 in Chicago headed into the Chicago support team. So that's 2 long-lived delivery teams in Austin on the differentiator services, 2 newly created regional support teams doing all the maintenance tasks in their regions, and 11 delivery teams you can resize and reassign. So a regional support team here is a team that's staffed by developers, not by operations analysts, and they do maintenance tasks and live support for all teams in their geographic region. All right, so what's good with this solution is you can create capacity because 1 team per region is doing all the maintenance tasks for other teams in that region. And you can reduce costs. You can resize and retire delivery teams once they've transferred the service into their regional support team. And it's less painful to transfer a live service between a delivery team and a regional support team than between a delivery team and an operations team, because there's a similar culture, there are similar ways of working to smooth over problems and reduce a bit of friction. And regional support teams can have the skills and domain knowledge to preserve technical quality across many services, and that will have a positive impact on services reliability. But what's bad here is reliability still takes a hit because the cognitive load can be really high for a regional support team. The only limit to the number of zero-demand services is the number of teams in a geographic region, and those regions will not be equal in size by any stretch of the imagination. Some will be way bigger than others in terms of number of teams and number of services. And future feature delivery is still hard here because having all the zero-demand services in one region in one team again means zero business owners or multiple business owners. So prioritization is hard, and it's back to the unproductive bun fights. And there's still a lack of job satisfaction here. Developers on a regional support team can feel like they're in a dumping ground devoid of mission or purpose. And you have to find funding for one developer support team per region, which means having a really good answer when you ask for money and someone says, wouldn't one operations team be cheaper than this? I know a public sector agency. It has 4 regional support teams spread across its 4 delivery centers. One delivery center is much larger than the others, and its support team of 5 developers has to complete maintenance tasks across 150 microservices from 50 live services built by 20 delivery teams. Just think about the impact that amount of responsibility, that cognitive load has upon deployments, time to recover from failure, and staff happiness. All 4 regional support teams have a higher churn rate than their delivery team peers. Okay, so our summary table shows clearly that having some regional support teams sliced by geography isn't so different in terms of outcome impacts than having a global operations team. Although the drawbacks do have less of a negative impact because developer support teams can have technical skills and domain knowledge if you put the right investment into those teams. Here are the maintenance mode survey results for developer support teams maintaining zero-demand services. Some of the answers here were just as frightening as the answers for the operations team solution. For new outcomes, 100% of respondents agreed with us that putting zero-demand services into a regional support team resulted in a capacity increase. And 66% said there were cost reductions because delivery teams were resized or retired. That's good. But for existing outcomes, 66% felt the level of services reliability was worse after a developer support team took over. Someone said to us, nobody was surprised when recovery times slowed down. It was just too much work across too many services for one team. And 66% said that feature delivery was more difficult than before. One responder said the team reached a very high cognitive load and a high number of supported services. It got to a point where they could not responsibly maintain some services. So we had to split the team in 2 and hire a couple more people. Yes, it cost us more, but recovery times are better, new features arrive sooner, and we've got happier engineers. And finally, 100% of respondents agreed that staff happiness took a plunge. One person said to us, we had a key engineer who held together their entire regional support team. When they moved on to a delivery team, morale plummeted and everyone was seeking to leave the team. Okay, here's our final maintenance mode solution, the one recommended by Equal Experts, and that's to form multi-product teams. It's a solution we've come up with ourselves after a lot of conversations and collaboration with our customers. Now, before I talk about multi-product teams, I need to mention You Build It, You Run It. If you're not familiar with You Build It, You Run It, it's an operating model in which product teams build, deploy, operate, and support their own digital services. That's how my colleague Beth Ann Timmins and I describe it. We published a giant You Build It, You Run It playbook. No pay gates, no subscriber walls, no nothing. You can download it for free at this QR code off the Equal Experts website. You might know You Build It, You Run It as DevOps teams, empowered product teams. It's got a lot of different names. On-call product teams means a product manager is incentivized to prioritize reliability alongside functionality because they're accountable, not an operations manager. Developers are incentivized to continually learn and build reliability into the services that they build because they're going to be on call at 3 a.m. for any problems. Think of You Build It, You Run It as better insurance for your business outcomes. You pay a slightly higher premium, but you have much better protection. So the trick here is to apply the exact same principles of outcome-oriented teams, empowerment, zero handoffs, and clear incentives to a maintenance mode solution. That's where the idea of multi-product teams came from. Why not apply empowered product teams to zero demand services and slice those teams by product families rather than something like geography? All right, so what does this mean? Product teams build and run their own services. All the zero demand services in a product family are transferred from their product teams into the multi-product team for their family when they reach zero demand. A multi-product team is a team staffed of developers, and they're focused on reliability for that family of products. There's no product manager in a multi-product team. That would wrongly imply the presence of a planned features backlog. But the crucial point here is that the team does report into the product lead, who owns that entire product family, and they are an apex decision maker for that family. Here's our American retailer one final time. It's not really American, but I like America. I went to a Walmart in America once and I bought a giant bag of Cheetos. It was the biggest bag of crisps I'd ever seen. That was lunch and dinner all sorted. I did feel a bit strange that night though. I had some really odd dreams. Now, with this maintenance mode solution, our American retailer has 5 live services in the customer journeys family being transferred into the customer journeys multi-product team, and 6 live services in the customer services family being transferred into the customer services multi-product team. That means 2 product teams building and running their own differentiator services indefinitely, 2 newly created multi-product teams handling maintenance tasks in their family, and 11 teams you can resize and or reassign. All right, so there's a lot of good here, we think. You can create capacity because 1 team per product family is doing all the maintenance work for that family. You can reduce costs. A product can be resized or retired when necessary. Transferring a live service between a product team and a multi-product team is pretty smooth. There's shared reliability incentives, as well as a similar culture and ways of working. Teams have the skills and domain knowledge to preserve a level of services reliability similar to before maintenance mode. Cognitive load for a multi-product team is constrained to the number of zero demand services in a product family, and they're all in one family, so the business context is much more manageable. You can fit it into your head. Ideally, they're all using similar tech, but that's another story. And if cognitive load does get to be too much for a multi-product team, you can slice that team so that each team owns like a domain of services within that particular family. So again, you keep the business context manageable and still having that one clear decision maker as well. And finally, developers in multi-product teams can have a sense of job satisfaction, and future feature delivery can happen at pace, because when a multi-product team identifies an improvement opportunity, that product lead can make priority calls between the different zero demand services in the family, which ones should be improved first, which ones should have new features added first. And because the team themselves have been making regular incremental updates to these services, they can ramp up to feature delivery in a pretty straightforward way. What's bad here with this solution, because everything has good and bad, you do need to spend time setting up the right guardrails. It's really important that you counter any dumping group preconceptions lurking in your organization, because they're always out there. What kind of guardrails am I thinking of? You need an organization-wide definition of zero demand that everyone understands and signs up to. I would suggest something like non-differentiators with 3 months or more of live traffic, and the product manager has announced no more funding. You will have a different definition for your own organization, but it's really important to have that one clear definition everyone can understand and relate to. Otherwise, people will try to shove something into a multi-product team saying it's zero demand, take it, when it's not yet. You also need a strong identity for multi-product teams. By giving a team accountability for the reliability outcomes for multiple services, you're giving them part of that identity. I think another really important thing to do is to name the team after the product family, Anyone who knows me will know that my biggest hill is that naming services and teams after Greek gods or cheeses or tube stations is dumb. And what you should do is name it after the thing that they're building. That has many advantages, and one of them is it makes it much harder to kind of slide work in through the side door into a team that doesn't relate to their core deliverables. I've definitely worked at places before where a team is supposed to be responsible for like file uploads or something, and then all of a sudden they're getting work in the side door to do something completely differently. And it would have been easier if that team be called Team File Upload than, I don't know, Team Yarg or something. What other guardrails? An automated service transfer process. You want to make it as friction-free as possible to move services between teams, between product teams and multi-product teams. I'd want an opinionated tech stack here, shared between teams. I'd want an internal developer platform with self-service paved roads. I want lots of things. And the other thing that's bad here is you do still have to find funding for one multi-product team per product family. You still need to have a good answer for someone asking you, wouldn't one operations team be cheaper than having 4 multi-product teams for our 4 product families? So that needs to be a value-based conversation, not just a cost conversation. You need to talk to the level of services reliability and the pace of future service delivery that you're looking for. And once you understand that, you can then show people why other maintenance mode solutions just won't cut it. You'll want to have some dashboards with business metrics to demonstrate to the budget holder why multi-product teams are worthy of investment. It might be a hard conversation to have, but just because something's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't try. All right, so multi-product teams is a maintenance mode solution that gives you the chance to achieve those new capacity and cost outcomes and protect your existing outcomes as well. We're trialing it at the moment with one of our long-term partners, an organization with, I think, 30 product teams who do you build it, you run it. They're accountable for reliability outcomes as well as functionality. Stakeholders there have a desire to increase capacity and reduce costs without sacrificing the benefits that they've experienced from you build it, you run it. Okay, so takeaways, what have we learned? When you leave this call today, here are the 3 things I'd like to take away. Number 1, if you're working in an organization with annual funding, zero demand services and maintenance mode are inevitable for non-differentiators. So it's important to plan for a solution in advance, not just fall into one by accident. Number 2, don't automatically chuck all the maintenance mode work over the wall to your operations team. You're making sacrifices that you're going to regret later on. And number 3, if you move your organization to you build it, you run it, and empower your product teams, moving to multi-product teams for maintenance mode is going to be a natural fit for you. All right, so thanks for coming. Thank you for listening to me. If you want to get in touch with me to hear more about this, then just scan the QR code there for my LinkedIn URL, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks very much. Back to you, Erin.
Thanks, Steve. I mean, you had some great dad jokes in there. Thank you. I think there was a lot of laughing in the background, but of course, no one's allowed to have their microphones on. I just wanted to comment on the summary table, because when you look at that, it just looks like there are so many crazy trade-offs and sacrifices in all those options apart from one, and it just makes you wonder how people make those decisions to choose those other options.
Yeah, well, let's bring that back up again for a moment, shall we? Where's it gone? So let's see. Nope. Let's jump to it again.
Whatever, I think it was just a few slides from the back. There we go.
So yeah, I've really struggled with how to present this information and to condense it for post-pandemic attention spans, Erin, because there's a lot to cover. We're talking 4 different solutions, 5 different outcomes. The real light bulb moment for me was this idea of people think about like the upfront outcomes. It's much easier to think about new things you want to achieve than things you want to protect. And what we've definitely seen at a bunch of different organizations, a lot of people that we work with have told us loud and clear that when you give stuff to an operations team, for maintenance mode. Things are better for a while, for sure, because you've got delivery teams picking up new work, everything seems fine. But bit by bit, drip by drip, you end up in a much worse situation than before. And I just want to re-emphasize again that it's absolutely nothing to do with the people you put on that operations team. I could be put on that team and I'd struggle with cognitive load. I'd make mistakes. We'd have reliability and feature delivery problems. Perhaps also one other idea is there's this fantasy that once you put a service into maintenance mode, that's it. You're never going to need to do anything on it ever again. And of course you do. Of course, someone has an idea. Of course, someone finds a little thing that, and they've got some data that says, if we tweak this one little thing, subscriber growth will double. So you're going to try it. And if the team you've got looking after that live service is incapable, through no fault of their own, of making the necessary changes, then you're going to be pretty grumpy when that 1 or 2 line change takes you 3 or 4 months to complete.
We have got some questions from attendees. So someone's asking, Sheila's asking, what do I do if I already have services in maintenance mode with an operations team? So if I already have one of these other options and not the multi-product option, where do I go from there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of sunk cost bias there, because people will be saying we've got one team owning it. The one team is OPEX, not CAPEX. Maybe it's outsourced. It's really cheap, Steve. Why change anything? You've really got to drag it back to what's the level of reliability that you're looking for. And I don't mean a vanity metric like incident count. I mean something like the amount of downtime you're experiencing, the amount of money you're losing each month, the amount of operational costs as well that you're incurring. And also, when you do need to make changes, how slow are you prepared for it to be? Are you prepared to wait a month for a priority call to be made? Are you prepared to wait 3 weeks for the coding to happen after that? Like, what do you want to live with? And as long as it's like a deliberate decision, I'm okay with that. But in my experience, it's not deliberate. People kind of sleepwalk into these problems and then they're quite hard to get out of afterwards.
Greg was asking a similar question about transitioning from one of those models to multi-product, and also asked if you'd seen that transition happen in practice.
I've seen it happen in part. I think, and again, it's really hard to cram everything into a talk of this length. I think the first thing I would do is say, let's move to you build it, you run it, especially the differentiators. I know this talk isn't about them. But those are the services where you need as much reliability as possible. You need fast feature delivery. You want people to be happy in the work they're doing there. So I'd probably look to start there. And then once it's up and running, then start to look at using a similar model for the teams in the zero services space. But you might do it a different way. It might be that the operational costs you're incurring just mean you have to start with the zero demand services straight away and forget the non-differentiators. We have worked with customers, we have worked with companies before where the ops team itself has moved to you build it, you run it. In fact, the car repair company I spoke about with the EPOS software, I do believe they ended up making their ops team you build it, you run it team. They put a couple of developers in there and said, actually, do you know what, you're going to own this EPOS software properly now. And job satisfaction has gone up and feature delivery has sped up a bit. So that's another way of looking at it as well. You build it, you run it, and product teams, it doesn't have to always come from the developer side down to operations. It can also start with an operations team and go back up into development.
There's a question about the data that you collected in the survey. You said there were like 40 or so organizations. So Rupert is asking about the average organization size or the number of people or services or any other.
You know what? I don't know that. That would be really good to know. We will go away and find that out and do that in like an updated version of the talk, or maybe publish it online somewhere. Off the top of my head, I'd say that they are all large enterprises, because Equal Experts tends to work with larger organizations. That's not always the case. But when I think back to the companies that were involved, most of them were large companies of, I don't know, 5,000 to 10,000 employees and more.
Okay. I'm going to scroll down to, actually, Rupert has another question. Do you have a common framework or method for establishing value in order to size stroke scale multi-product teams?
It would be great if that thing existed. I use Joshua Arnold's value framework that's on costofdelay.com or I think it's now, excuse me, it's blackswanfarming.com. But I think that once you get past his framework, the idea of you trying to increase revenue, protect revenue, reduce costs or avoid costs, you do still need to apply that to your context and understand how much money is flowing through your system at any given time, how much of your operational costs are you avoiding. You know, when things go wrong, how much money can you lose in an hour is one of my starter questions normally when I start to work with a new organization. And even though people kind of find it hard to come up with like numbers on that, just like estimating work in terms of story points, you can do it in a relative fashion. If people don't know how much value is attached to a particular service, you can put two together and say to the product manager, which of these two is generating the most value for you? And that can be a good start. And then you move on to the third thing. Gradually, you can come up with a prioritized list of these things are more valuable than others. And as long as you continue to refine that list and emphasize that it's imperfect and publish your assumptions, then I think that can work pretty well.
There's another question that's sort of about money as well, from Ben W. What makes the issues of maintenance mode inevitable with annual funding? And why doesn't the same challenge exist with cost challenges around persistent funding?
That's a great question. So with annual funding, it runs out. You have to go back and get more money, and it's really hard. Normally those services are funded through CapEx, and it's hard to go back and get more CapEx money for a thing. People will say it's already been built. Look, the operations team are looking after it. We don't want to spend more money. We want to spend more money elsewhere. I mean, that's a way bigger conversation about how annual budgeting works in IT. There could be like a whole other topic. But what tends to happen in my experience and from the folks I've spoken with is that something like, I don't know, the product details page and the online checkout experience at our not American, not retailer, they're kind of waved through each year, or there's a agreement that there's going to be 2 or 3 years of funding for this, and it just gets increasingly harder and harder for non-differentiators. And sometimes even when something like I don't know, like an order orchestrator is being built, or a cosmetics page or a fashion page, the product manager, the budget holder will be told up front, you've got 6 months of money here for a 5-person team and you're locked into that. There's no more money coming to you, especially in the macro economy we're in right now, where money is so tight across so many different sectors and organizations.
Thanks. Another question is, how can you watch out for the maintenance mode problem coming at you before it happens?
Yes. So the symptoms are people saying we need to increase capacity for new propositions. So what's happening is somewhere there's a backlog of new stuff to do, entirely new services, entirely new ideas, and it's growing. And on the other side, people are saying team costs are too high. So it's that dual thing where you're like, okay, so outstanding work to start is going up, and people are saying costs are just too high. And also, just assume it's going to happen. Just assume that it's in your future. You're on a team, you're currently building a data pipeline or a monolith or some microservice or whatever, and it's part of a product capability. Just assume that once it goes live, money's going to run out real quick, and there will be pressure to either put it into the background and work on something new, or hand it over to your operations team. Like, don't assume that the money's going to last, because it's not.
I think you also said earlier in the talk that a lot of times these are the services that you had to build, not that you wanted to build.
Yes. Yeah, there was a bit I didn't want to expand on there, which is basically there's no SaaS that fits for it. So you just kind of have to do it. You build it for parity. An easy example of that would be something like, I don't know, like a stock taking system. Maybe you just can't buy the SaaS for your business context, so you have to build at least part of it yourself. Mm-hmm. You don't do that because you're going to delight customers with it. You do that because you just need it.
Yeah. Okay. So Gary is saying that he's in a team that has inherited a number of maintenance only services, and they do practice build it, run it.
Cool.
And I guess he's asking, like, what happens when some requests come through, like, I guess, upgrades or features, and he's suggesting that do you look at the value of what that might bring before you
ideally
decide to just add it to the backlog or push back?
Yeah, ideally. I think like in theory, a maintenance mode team doesn't have a backlog, right? Because that implies that there's like planned features. But of course, there is a backlog because maintenance tasks become planned because there's just too much work for a small team to cope with. And yeah, ideally, you look at some kind of value-based decisions, but that team probably doesn't have a product manager sitting around all day long thinking about the value inherent in zero demand services. Probably no product manager on the team, or they're thinking about something else that's being built elsewhere at the moment. So if in doubt, look at it and ask yourself, how much time will this save? Because time is a useful proxy for money. If you can't get any further on money, just go, okay, how much time will this save customers, or how much time will this save us on the back end?
That's a good answer. I think I've gone through all the questions, but there is an ask of a copy of the slides. Is that going to be going anywhere?
I don't know. There'll be a YouTube video soon. We can look at putting the slides somewhere as well. I normally end up hosting them somewhere on my personal site, I think. Do I do that? I can't remember. I'll have to
I think what you're saying is the content is going to be available.
Yeah, there'll be there'll be a YouTube video soon, and it'll be announced on LinkedIn and on Twitter. Yes.
Okay. So we've exhausted questions. So now we're showing you a slide that has some details about our next Expert Talks Online. It's Wednesday, the 3rd of May, the same time, and it's scaling application security to 100 plus teams at HMRC Digital with some of our friends, Ben and Gerald. Okay, that sounds good. So thank you, Steve, for your enlightening talk. It was really interesting. And thank you for everyone's questions. And I hope to see you again at another talk. And also, if you want to come work with me and Steve, go to our website and look up our careers page.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for coming. Bye.
Bye.